Hi friends. In today's episode, episode number 19, we will be covering the topic of cycle counting in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. So if you're watching this video for the first time, my name is Shankaran and I have been posting videos, documents and articles related to Dynamics 365 F&O. And this series we have started specifically for warehouse management series where we have covered a lot of interesting topics related to WMS. So I will strongly recommend you to get through those topics and before getting into this episode number 19. So we have already in the last 18 episodes we covered in detail about load, release to arrow, shipment, waves, work, packing and containerization. All those we have covered. We also in the previous episode number 18 we covered about cross-talking basics. So in this episode we will cover about the cycle counting basics in Dynamics 365. So let's quickly get into this topic. So first of all, for the common understanding, I have just prepared a quick presentation. So in today's episode number 19, we will be covering about the cycle counting. What is cycle counting in Dynamics 365? What are all the configurations which are required for performing the cycle counting? And in cycle counting, we can create a counting based on the counting plan where a batch job can be configured, or you can also create it by using a counting threshold where you predefine a threshold limit based on which the system you are asking expecting the system to generate a counting work. So basically either way you can generate a counting work, and we will also see the overall process flow in Dynamics 365. So that's the quick agenda for today's session. So first of all, what is cycle counting? Cycle counting is a warehouse process that you can use to audit on-hand inventory items, right? So let's say at any point in time you want to verify how much of quantity you have it in on and whether that matches with the quantity in the system or not. So each and every time the stock audit operation is performed by the warehouse team where they will ensure that the system stock matches with their real-time inventory. So that's where the cycle counting process comes into picture. So this is done basically quarterly once or offerly once. Sometimes even there are warehouses I have seen which performs the cycle counting operation at the end of every month, closure of the stock. So after the before the inventory closure, they also do this every time, right? So that will ensure that your stock is always matching your real time data. So generally the process that need to be followed is you need to create a cycle counting work. And for creating the cycle counting work, like I said, there are two ways. Either you do it by using the cycle counting plan, or you can create it by using a cycle counting threshold. So that's we will also see quickly on how to do that. And then you need to process the cycle counting work. Once the cycle counting work is processed, the work is getting generated, and that work you need to perform using the mobile device, or you can also perform the work in the system itself. Once the work is performed, then if there are any differences between the counted versus actuals, then you need to resolve those differences and post the counting journals so that the stock adjustments can be performed in the system, right? So that's the whole process of how to achieve the cycle counting. So having said that, let's quickly get into the system. First, you need to ensure that item, warehouse, and location configurations are in place. So let me quickly jump into D365. So first is already you are aware of it that since we are talking about advanced warehouse item, because cycle counting can be performed only for the advanced warehouse items. So the released product item, whatever you are using, you need to make sure that the item is actually configured for advanced warehouse management processes. So the storage dimension is the important point here. So the storage dimension here we are using WHS. So here it is actually enabled for use at warehouse management processes. And I just quickly want to show it. So in the warehouse also you need to make sure that the warehouse which we were using is 16.8-WMS. So here also you need to make sure that the use warehouse management process is enabled. Otherwise you will not be able to generate the cycle counting work, right? So that's the first important prerequisite setup. And then what else we have is in terms of location. Under this warehouse, we have already created a lot of locations to perform our earlier load shipment related operations. So we have created multiple locations over here. But the point here is whatever the location profile which is tagged to the location. Let's say this is the location bulk 0505 is the location profile ID. You need to make sure that the allow cycle counting is enabled. If this is not enabled, then you will not be able to perform the cycle counting for those locations which are assigned with this location profile bulk 05. So generally this is actually used for the storage locations let's say in case of the packing or shipping locations, even if I go to the location for packing, the location profile ID pack, we have not enabled allow cycle counting, because for the packing location cycle counting operation is not required. Still, if you want to check the items available in the packing also using the cycle counting process, also you can do that, but generally that's not a business best practice in the warehouse operation, right? So make sure that first in the location profile the cycle counting is enabled, and that particular location profile is tagged to the location in which you want to perform the cycle counting, right? Let me go back to the presentation. The next one is we need to check the WMS parameter, which is warehouse management parameter. If I go to warehouse management setup, warehouse management parameter, make sure that we need to tag the appropriate cycle counting adjustment journals. So here, inventory adjustment type, I have tagged cycle counting. So let me click on view details so that you can also know. So this is the inventory adjustment type which we are actually using, and this is the journal name. So this is a journal which we have already created. So regarding the creation of just journal type, we are not discussing about it, but the journal type should be counting. So whenever the stock adjustment is posted, so you will know this is because of counting this particular stock is adjusted at any point in time, and make sure that you have selected the appropriate voucher series also to generate the number sequence, right? So this is the important setup, and the counting journal need to be tagged, and you can also provide a reasoning code. What is the reason for this particular counting change? Stock check or threshold counting, it has reached the limit. So you can, it is purely at the discretion of the warehouse manager. Based on their requirements, they can configure the counting reason code, and that is actually assigned in the cycle counting adjustment type. And you also need to assign the default cycle count work class id. We have already discussed about the work class id, how the work class id help you to configure the mobile device menu item. And the work class id whatever configured over here, let's say cc count is the work class id. Let me go back to the mobile device menu items. So I have already created as mobile device menu item cycle count, and the same work class need to be assigned in the work classes also, so that you will get this option in the mobile device. So make sure that you use the existing work, and also it can be directed by system directed or user directed. So I have created one for user directed, another one for system directed work. So the system work will be created. I will also check upon this particular toggle disable cycle count threshold after discussing the topic of cycle count threshold, right? So these are the basic setups. And also if you want to enable some of the options which are getting displayed in your mobile device, if you want to display the item number, license plate, batch number, then you need to enable those options appropriately over by using the option of cycle counting over here, which is under the mobile device, right? So mobile device menu item. So using this option, first you need to create a mobile device menu item, otherwise the worker will not be able to use the menu item to perform the cycle counting. I think those are the setups which are required. Yeah, now we'll get into cycle counting plan. So cycle counting plan is under warehouse management, setup, and cycle counting, and you have cycle counting plans. Cycle counting plans basically can be generated to perform it in batch job, or you can use it to perform immediately to do a cycle counting process. All you have to do is just click on new, type the reference cycle counting id. 16a-wms is the warehouse. You can provide the description as per your requirement, and then you can tag a work pool id if you want, to group the work orders, or else this is not mandatory. But make sure that number of cycle counts cannot be zero. So even if I simply save this, system will throw an error saying that number of cycle counts cannot be zero, right? So how many number of cycle counts do you want to perform? Do you want to perform 10, 5? How many you want to perform? And you want to perform it in what gap of days between cycle count. Let's say today I have performed a cycle count. After 10 days I want to perform. After 30 days I want to perform. What is the gap between the cycle counting you want to perform it? So you can actually capture the number of days over here. These are basically number of days. And then in D365 you also have the option to control the empty locations, whether those empty locations you want to perform the cycle counting or not. So if you exclude empty locations, then you will have the option to select the work template, but you also have the option to select include empty location, which means the warehouse which you are checking, if you want to check the empty locations also, there may be stock, but in the system you don't have the stock in the empty locations, right? So that's why it is called as an empty location. So do you want to check those locations also, then you need to select include empty location. And if you want to check only the empty locations, you can also do that, but in these two cases you will not the option to, you will not have the option to select the work template. So let's say if I select include empty, then the work template is not disabled. And even if I select only empty, also work template is disabled. And only if I select exclude empty, then I will have the option to select the work template id also, right? So let's get into the work template also. Here you need to make sure the work order type is cycle counting, and by default in D65 standard comes with the default cycle counting setup. So it's a simple setup. We have already discussed a locked up order, what type and what template, and how to create a work order type for the corresponding this thing. If you have missed it, please do check out the video episodes in which we have covered about creating the work templates, and then come back to this video, right? So let me go back. So if you want, you can capture the work template, and let me click on save. And on the bottom grid, you can also select the specific products or product variants. All you have to do is just click on new, provide a sequence number other than 0. Let me give the sequence number as 1. And let me say the item is for a advanced warehouse item which we were configuring. So in the product query, currently it is disabled. So once if you click on save, then the defining the product query option will be enabled. So let me click on save, define product query. So here I can provide the item number for which I want to perform. If you want to perform cycle counting for specific items, or if you want to perform the cycle counting for all the items, just leave this particular field blank. But let's say I want to perform the cycle counting for this item. I'll just select the item number, and then on the top, as of now we have not given the, so as of now we have not given the warehouse and location. So here you have to give the warehouse and location. The other thing is, like, even if you want to configure it at the variant level, you can do it. If you have selected variant and clicked on save, then this product variant must be enabled, and this will be disabled. But we have selected product query, so that's the reason define product query is enabled. And the thing is, let me select the location. So here you need to select the warehouse, for which warehouse and the location id in which you want to perform the counting process. And let me select the location recb1. So then let me click on ok. So now all you have to do is, if you want to process this immediately, just click on process cycle counting plan, and you can do it, or you can enable batch processing, and you can set a recurrence based on the recurrence configuration. Whatever you have done, this batch job will run every time, and the cycle counting plan will be generated, the work will be generated, right? Also the other option is, like, you can also do it in the separate batch job. So under warehouse management, cycle counting, there are two options which are available: cycle counting work by location, cycle counting work by item. Either way, you can use these two to process the cycle count. Only when you process the cycle count, the cycle count work will be generated. So you can use a cycle count by item. So here also you can process the, this is basically a batch job. Simply by clicking on ok, the processing operation for cycle count will be done. So this will create the cycle count for our item. So the batch job is completed. So the created work will be available in the count work. Um, Let us filter the warehouse. We can say 16A. So this is the cycle count work that is generated. So here, if you want, you can have the other options, like, so 356. Let me open this. Okay, so this is actually created for the work order type. You can see this is a cycle counting work order type. So after, once the cycle count is created, work is created, then you need to copy this work id, go to our warehouse management app, and then the inventory tab, cycle count. So you can scan the work order type. So here the work order type is available, in which location, in which license plate the this work is actually generated. So you will have the visibility to understand, and you need to, the person who is actually doing is need to scan the batch and complete the cycle counting operation. So it will ask for the quantity, but here we need to check the con and detail also. I think 378, also one more ID is generated. I think this is the correct one. RECV location is RECV, so this is the cycle count. Anyway, so this is how the cycle count work is generated. So you need to perform the cycle count work using the mobile device, where you need to scan the batch and enter the quantity and do the adjustment. You can also do it by using the complete work over here, and then once that is done, then you can also view all the closed cycle count works over here. I think I have already completed cycle count work for 16A. Let me check. No, it's not completed. So that's a fresh one which got created. So basically, you can view all the closed cycle count works over here, and then also you can review the pending works for cycle count over here. So if there are any adjustments need to be done, which need to be reviewed and then confirmed, then it can be reviewed over here. Currently there is no work pending for review, that's why the page is blank. And one more thing which I want to tell you is, um, so that's how the cycle count plan works. So the cycle count plan, once it is generated, it need to be processed, so which will create the cycle counting work, and the cycle counting work need to be completed using the mobile device. So this is basically cycle count for you. And cycle count threshold is, sorry, let me select the cycle count threshold. Cycle count threshold is basically the option of providing the threshold limits based on which the cycle counting work need to be generated, right? So if I click on new, you can provide a value over here just based on your convenience. Cycle count threshold ID, it can be based on a quantity or percentage. We provide a quantity and threshold quantity is 10. Let's say whenever the quantity goes less than 10, I want a cycle counting need to be performed. You need to provide a unit, eaches or pallet or whatever it is, you need to provide the unit, and you need to enable process cycle counting immediately, which will allow the system to process the cycle counting immediately once this threshold limit is reached. And you can also provide the days between the cycle counting, minimum 10 days or 12 or 30 days, between what days you want to perform the cycle counting. And like I said there, here also you have the options to provide the filtration for the locations and items. You can configure it over here. So whenever this threshold is reached, a cycle counting work will be automatically generated, right? So let's go back to our presentation. So that's what basically I'm trying to list it over here. Cycle counting plan is a cycle counting threshold. Counting work created immediately or periodically based on the batch jobs. But here based on the quantity or percentage threshold, that's what we saw, that based on the threshold, whatever we are defining, based on which the counting work will be initiated. And this counting work can be done automatically or manually. You can also schedule a batch job, right? So it can be done automatically or manually by selecting the processing cycle count option. This here it basically does it by automatically once the threshold limit is reached. So every time whenever the threshold limit is reached, then the cycle counting work is automatically created. Counting can be performed for empty locations, that's what we saw. Yes, that can be done, but here it cannot be done, even though because it's purely based on the threshold. But still here, if you give the threshold limit as 0, and I think that it's also doable, but generally in case of thresholds, it is not done for the empty locations, but it is done by using the counting plan. And then we have the work template configuration. So even the cycle count plan, we saw that work template can be assigned, but here in thresholds we cannot assign the work templates. And of course we can also define the maximum number of counting here also. If you see, um, so here you can actually mention the number of days between the cycle count plans, cycle counting, but maximum number of counting it can be done, can be configured only in cycle counting plans, but not in the case of the threshold, right? So either way you can create a cycle counting work and process the cycle counting work and then complete in case of any adjustments which are actually required. So that is cycle counting plan and cycle counting threshold basics. So this is a process flow chart illustration which I actually saw it in cycle counting Microsoft Learn page. So basically, you can create a cycle counting work based on a cycle counting threshold or based on cycle counting plans. And in order to make sure that create cycle counting using item parameters and various location parameters, that's also we saw. And by combining these two, we need to process the cycle counting work, and this work need to be processed by using the mobile device, and you need to resolve if there are any discrepancies. So this is how the overall process flow comes into picture. So counting process is a very important topic as far as warehouse management process is concerned, so I thought I can also cover this, the basics of how to do a configuration and perform a cycle counting. Even in the previous episode we saw about cross talking, because even the cross talking, whenever the stock comes in and comes out goes out, actually cycle counting is primarily done during some idle period, not non-peak times. So at that time the cycle counting process is basically done in the warehouse processes, right? So I will also share this link in which a detailed description is given for partial location cycle counting. I found this to be very interesting, so please do check out this link if you want to get more details about the cycle counting. Please do check out this particular link. I will also share this link in the description, right? So we are actually about to end this WMS series, and the next episode, number 20, will be our last episode for WMS series. We have covered in detail about all the major topics of warehouse management and functionalities in Dynamics 3, advanced warehouse management functionalities in Dynamics 365. Hope you guys enjoyed the entire series. I also had a very good time learning some of the important concepts and topics. So with the next episode, we will be concluding the WMS series, and then we'll be quickly starting off a new series. So if you want to get regular updates, please do make sure that you subscribe to my channel, Sriram Sivashankaran. If you're using LinkedIn, please make sure that you follow my profile. Thank you.